Hey everybody, I'm Michael Brown, filmmaker, independent filmmaker, documentary filmmaker, and political activist. I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my stories try to make sure you think a little bit when you watch my films, along with being entertained. And I love nothing more than film, and I can't wait to talk about it.
Welcome to Scratch, Claw, Push, a podcast about artists clawing out a place for themselves in the world. I'm Billy Joe Cones.
And I'm Brendan Duke. Let's go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, fellow Scani. I always like to sniff out the fellow Scanis because, we're special people. So I think I first found you on Instagram, maybe kind of like our first guest, Mark Isaacs. Like, I think I found you on Instagram back when you first started doing your haunted. You have a haunting TV show that's on Amazon, right? And so, yeah, I don't know where exactly in the thing we want to start. So how did you become a filmmaker? Let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, it started at a very early age for me. I grew up in the John Hughes era of The Breakfast Club and 16 Candles and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and those movies were just everything. I mean, I'm obviously aging myself here now, but and then I started seeing the movie that really turned it for me was in the United States, it's known as The Professional, but overseas it's known as Leon. And I became friends with Natalie Portman, and that was her first movie. And we were kind of getting in it together. She's obviously doing much better than I am doing now. That was really the beginning when I was 16 years old and I started writing scripts and I had no idea what I was doing. And that's kind of where it started. And then I went to University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee for film. And the program wasn't what I thought it was. So I just actually went into radio at WKTI in Milwaukee and produced a morning show called Brightman and Miller. I was a fill-in producer, though. I wasn't the producer. I was also a marketing consultant there. And that's really where it all started. I always knew I was going to go back to film.
So, you sound like you kind of did something similar to me, where I didn't have like a proper film major at my school. I mean, so I had to do like the comm arts thing where you're just kind of like grasping at different, kind of whatever classes you think will kind of like amalgamate that, all the skill set you think.
I like that word, amalgamate. It's good. For me, it was a film program, but it wasn't like real work experience. It was like developing 30-second film, drawing frame by frame, and like really old school film, which is fine, but it's not applicable to them. And this was in the, late 90s, when I went. So even then it was outdated, I thought. So the course wasn't what I thought it was, right? So, I took a long detour to get to where I am now. And I mean, I am 45. I'm still really just starting. And I've been doing film for 18 years now. And it's been quite a journey. It's still a fun journey, but the last year I've been getting my teeth kicked in. If I'm being really honest, it's been really rough.
I'm in the same boat, so I empathize wholeheartedly. So like, talk about a little bit about that thing about getting sidetracked and coming back in it, because that's something that's multiple guests have talked about. Like, you have people that will go off and maybe take the corporate gig because maybe they've got a family to take care of, or you just kind of go take this other, because we all got bills to pay. So you go do whatever, and then you just kind of get stuck for a while, and then and a lot of people, they get there and they don't get out, but then there's people like yourself, like you have to find your way back. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's very Karate Kid-esque though. Like in the way, I mean, like sand the deck, paint the fence, like wait, what do these things have to do with this other thing I'm trying to do? Right. And at the time I didn't know that I was Karate Kidding myself, if you want to call it that. But learning radio, huge. I mean, audio is everything, right? And one of my mantras for film now is you can't fix bad audio. And people forget that half of film is audio. So I really learned, everything I needed to learn in radio. And plus, I mean, I grew up pretending I was a DJ and recording songs off the radio and whatever. So, I mean, there was that part of me too. Um, and then, I had a son, and I was going to do radio, and then I was going to say, okay, we're going to do this film thing. Finally, well, then I had a son in 2005, and I'm like, can't do film. So I didn't really start. I mean, I was always doing things, but I wasn't really like professional until about 2014 when I did the documentary series Haunted State, which is streaming in 70 countries. And we recently, so it's on Prime right now, but we just took it off. Like, so you have to pay for it now. It's not free with Prime anymore. But so that was my first series, and I got my foot in the door, got really lucky. It was a cerebral approach versus like the, oh, I got goosebumps, and like the really popular cable shows. Is a very, I'll just be honest, like it's in a sense it's boring compared to those shows, but and that was kind of my first a big bite too, though, because filming with infrared and thermal, and then filming in like regular film, like holy cow. And I did this all by myself, by the way.
Yeah,
so
that's really like just jumping into the deep end of those pools.
You got to run before you can walk, right? So, and that's what I did. And I learned through making a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad feedback. If you go read the reviews for those films and the TV show, because there's 2 films out too, they're really not, people are brutal. And then there's that part of it too, is learning that most jobs don't, like if you work at a grocery store, most people don't walk up to you and be like, yeah, the way you stocked those shelves was really, and they critique it. Like when you're in the entertainment industry, like you don't complain about it, but it's part of the deal. And you don't really think about that part of it until you're like, wow, and now I'm to the point where I don't take stuff personal. I don't actually, be honest, I don't read any of it. But yeah, it's just been like every single day I learn something new, and I don't ever want to be naive to the fact that that's going to change. Like that's going to be the case literally until I'm gone. You know what I mean? With film is I'm learning and I'm trying to teach also. So it's quite the journey.
That's so brave. I mean, because that's the thing that stops a lot of people from even starting something, is that they're afraid of what people will think. They're afraid of what people will say. Right. And so that's part of why I wanted to talk to you anyways, because I feel like that's super brave, and it's super brave to do something you've never done before and just go, it'll be what it'll be. And that's kind of where we started with this podcast, is Brandon had made podcasts before, but I hadn't. And I was kind of like, let's not overthink it. Let's just make something, and it can evolve, and it'll just be what it's going to be, So how did you actually then, we glossed over it from the day job thing to making Haunted State. How did that come about?
So I was involved in I want to be careful, a big political thing in Wisconsin in 2010. And if you're from Wisconsin, you know what was happening in 2010. And I'm not going to say anymore. And I started an effort that was national. And I always thought politics was a good idea until I did it. And then I realized, like, talking to dead people and ghosts was more fun than dealing with politicians, right? I mean, it was the craziest year of my life, the best year and the worst year of my life. And that's when I was like, I remember being in this political thing and being like, man, I really wish I could hone my craft and be creative and do the things that I want to do. And that was what pushed me, catapulted me into, when you think something is taken away, that's when you really cherish it the most, right? And I did not want to go down the political thing. I just wanted to do the thing that I was doing and not to get into politics, because that's the last thing I want to talk about. But ultimately it helped me. And then, I just kind of learned from there. And then, the really big thing too that really helped me was social media, and the fact, and I'm not a big social media guy, though. I don't love social media, but those groups of people like me that wanted to have knowledge on film, but had no idea where to start, what to do, lighting, color grading, what is log, like all these things. And I really literally learned by screwing up. And then that's, how I've gotten better and better and better. And I was
So,
talking off camera to Brandon actually about
mhm.
one of my earlier projects, and he had mentioned it to me, and I basically said, "Yeah, it's out there, but I'm like embarrassed now because I'm a way more accomplished filmmaker, and I understand things a little more, especially with composition and light and everything back then." But that's the fun part about being creative is you see that journey, and you can do this with any artist, right? Any artist that you look at, musician, filmmaker, you look at their early stuff, and sometimes that's more beloved than when they become polished. But I just, yeah, I really, I have ADHD, so that helps me. Because we look before we leap, and that actually ADHD actually helped me in this case because when you have cognitive distortions and you think, oh no, what are these people going to say? What if I do this, and what if they don't like? That doesn't exist. Like obviously you want your audience to like it, but you don't become so obsessed with that that's your focus, and then you hang everything on that. Is odds are people are not going to like some of the stuff you do, and it just you live with it as long as you know that you did the best you could in that window of time where you were. Because when I look back to my older stuff, comparing it to the stuff I do now, I just don't necessarily think it's very fair. It's still in there though, of course, and I know all the creatives listening can, you know,
What's that famous saying that no piece of art is ever finished, it's just abandoned?
right. And that so that was like when I was I think I might have been in a freshman in high school when they redid, where they were talking about redoing Star Wars. Remember when they that, and it got criticized heavily. But now that I am in the film industry, I totally get it. I totally get it. You know what I mean?
If you have George Lucas money, you're just like, well, you can't stop me. So
exactly.
Here comes the fourth edition of the original trilogy.
Right.
Well,
right.
So going back to the 2010 year, because you said how that was a really hard year, and you said it's so true. Like when something is taken away from you, when the ability to do something is taken away from you, that is when your desire for it increases. Do you think that's what pushed you on, or how did you get through that year knowing you couldn't do that right then? Like what kept you going?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too, is there's this voice inside of me because you're only one yes away from making it. So there are so many talented people out there, and they're not getting the yes. And I like to think I'm one of those people, to be honest. But yeah, there's just a little voice inside of you that just says keep going. I mean, first of all, when you just think about life itself, we're lucky to be here. Every single one of us, we're really lucky to be here. And as you start getting older and you start thinking of your legacy, especially if you have kids, and you start thinking about, okay, what's going to happen to me, and those thoughts start kind of creeping in. I really appreciate just even being alive right now, right? So knowing that and having the ability to do what I love, that kind of trumps everything, right? Like you got to shoot your shot, do it. If you fall on your face, you only fail when you quit. Full stop, right? The moment you quit, that's when you've failed, right? And the other thing is too, to have realistic expectations, because I got lucky getting connected with Amazon, totally lucky. And now I have carte blanche with Amazon. So anything I make, I can put on Amazon, but I mean, I'm open to other places too, but it's bottom line. There's a little bit of luck too, but it's just that tenacity to just keep trying and just keep going and, reset. And I mean, when you talk about Edison and Louis Latimer, who invented the light bulb, I mean, all the times that they failed was literally, hundreds of times.
Mm-hmm.
And Latimer, and actually this is one of my projects, but Louis Latimer is a man of color who kind of came in and made the light bulb what it is. And he never actually got the credit for it. So I think that, and I have a documentary about that. And that's kind of how film is sometimes too, is sometimes you're doing things and people aren't seeing it. You're not getting the credit for it, but there's that love of what you're doing, of your craft, whatever it is. And I think that that's just the fuel, is I know that I'm just one yes away.
Is it also kind of, do you feel like it's a little bit of like a chip on your shoulder? Because I know I kind of have that, where I look at people like you seem like you're kind of like me, like we both kind of probably got into this like a lot later than we would have wanted to. I know people like they came right out of college and, maybe because they knew somebody or they went to the right school, and then, like they're right up in there, and now they're doing all the stuff that, that, that we want to do. And they're by the time they're 30, they're already there. But when you get way past that, I feel like I've noticed, like, this seems like for people, like, it's funny. Remember, there's the if you saw the movie, the Tick Tick Boom, the musical, where the guy, like, I think it's so charming because he's talking about turning 30 and this is like a big existential crisis. I'm like, dude, wait till you hit 40 or you're looking down the barrel of 40, like, at point blank, and you haven't done the thing. Like, that's when you get some real existential angst. But I found that if you can kind of channel it the right way, it can kind of propel you. Have you found that to be the case in your thing, where you're like, now you're like, once you kind of get that ball rolling,
Yeah, there's definitely a chip on my shoulder, and it's hard to not show people that. Like, if I'm doing a pitch, or if I'm creating something or talking to someone and they say no, or they'll say, hey, this really needs to be funded, but no, which is really common. Yeah, it's hard to not show that. So yeah, I think you almost have to have that, though. If you're easily run over, this is not the industry for you. If you don't like no, this is not the industry for you. Yeah,
it requires like a certain emotional resilience, because I've seen people literally who have, you look at them and on paper they've got everything they need to succeed, but like, you watch them take that first big hit, whatever it is, and
or even little hits, just little things sometimes.
Yeah.
And you're like, really? That stopped you? Okay.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's running through the mud, and you're up to your knees in mud, and you just keep going, and that's what it is. And eventually you're gonna find a safe patch, right? And I think, and for some people too, is they may even get through that, and then they have like somewhat of a career. Because I have friends that I'm working with now that are in Hollywood that are successful, that had really big success, and now with the industry's shifting after the strike, and now the cutbacks, and people who could greenlight things before cannot greenlight things now, and people whose phones were ringing off the hook, their phones aren't ringing now. So that makes it even harder for people like me, who are like, no one knows who I am. You know what I mean? And I want to actually share a story about this. So I'd mentioned I have a documentary film called The Latimer Legacy, and I'm working on it's a story. It's relevant to the story. It's about two men of color, George Latimer and Louis Latimer, and it's a father and a son, and basically what they did to make the world what it is. And the fact, after you see this film, you're like, how come I have never heard of these people? And it's a very powerful story, and I'll leave the details out. But we went to the National Endowment of Humanities, and we were up for a $600,000 grant. And the process is, you submit your grant, you have 5 people individually read it, and they rate you. And you have to get 5 excellence. And if you get 5 excellence, you move on to the next phase, and there's a good chance you're going to get funded. And you see all the notes afterwards. So as me, the person who submitted it, I get to see what everyone was saying, right? So when they individually read it, I had gotten 4 excellence and 1 good. So it's excellent, very good, good. So I got like 4 5s and then a 3. And I was like, well, then they all meet, and then they all come up with their final vote. Well, then we went down to, I think it was 2 excellence. And the person who gave me the 3 was a member of the film industry. And they said, Michael Brown has made a documentary about roller derby and the paranormal, and didn't watch them, obviously, because the roller derby film was award winning. It was in the Milwaukee Film Festival, the LA Film Festival. It was on national TV 5 times. So it did really, really well. Didn't watch my stuff. And he just looked at the content of what my topics were, and he just took a dump on me, and we did not get the grant. And I'm going to tell you, that one hurt more than anything, because this is a story that I'm going to New York this summer to film more of it, and we're kind of self-funding it. We did get a couple of grants, but that's a big no. I mean, that's a year and a half of work. One person came in and slammed the door on it, and all the other people, I don't know who they were, but it was, you could tell by the lingo that the person was using that they were in the film industry, and that hurt. It hurt. It hurt my whole team. Like, we were like, it was like a funeral. And we're still going, though. So now we're taking another path, and we're coming up with another plan. We're not really going to go with the you know, the funding route, the grant route. Now we have the Smithsonian Institute attached. I have an Oscar-nominated director, co-director Andrew Young attached. Like, this is a major, major, major picture, and we're still getting no's, and it's really hard to swallow that. So there's just one story of the many times I got. That was the worst one though, by far, because we were this close. And for those of you listening, I'm showing my fingers like tiny, like we're close, and we ended up not getting it.
Do you find that that's a thing, like maybe more and more so nowadays as the industry is kind of changing? You get like these gatekeepers a lot of time, like these old school cats that like, oh, like I do film and, you know,
Yeah.
or whatever, you know, they come out there like, cause they don't really have any respect for, like, you know, for someone who might have like, okay, yeah, you do the first thing about the haunted state, or then you do the thing about roller derby. But when you're in that early stage, you kind of have to, it's kind of like that beggars can't be choosers. You got to find the thing that you hope is interesting and then try to make something out of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I see so many of these, I see a lot of people that kind of come from that old school mentality, and you, that just really just, it's almost like they just don't see any of it. I've seen so much cool stuff like in the last few years, especially since the pandemic, because we're all staying at home and, you know, going through YouTube or whatever streaming services you got. And there's a lot of cool stuff out there that's not necessarily coming from those traditional channels. Yeah. And it's like, so how are you, is that when you kind of have to kind of go back to that chip and just kind of say like, you know what, screw you, buddy. We're doing the thing like you're doing with your, the Latimer legacy. Like you got to just use that to push through.
Yeah. There's a voice in my head that, and I don't really hear voices, but there's a voice in my head that says they're wrong. They're all wrong. I mean, you think about, you know, inspirational stories like Michael Jordan got cut his junior year from high school. Michael Jordan got cut. That dude didn't know what he was talking about, right? So, I mean, I think about those types of stories. Harrison Ford didn't make it on the screen until he was 38. Harrison Ford, one of the greatest actors of our generation, right? One of the most iconic actors. So, you know what? You just kind of brush off your shoulder and say, all right, well, you know, you do want to make them pay, but it doesn't become about that. Because like, here's the thing with Haunted State. If you watch it, you realize it's cerebral. It's about, can we communicate with our lost loved ones? We had a personal situation with, no spoiler alerts, but one of our characters had a code word with her dad when he dies. And if he can, did you make it through episode 8, Billy, by chance?
No,
you did. Okay, yeah.
I didn't get to that.
I'll send those to you.
Okay.
But it becomes this story of humanity, and it's not about ghosts. I mean, yeah, it's the branding Haunted State screws me a little bit, I guess. But up until the 1930s, that was credible. If you said I'm investigating the paranormal, it was credible, just like saying I'm curing cancer. Now, if you say I'm investigating the paranormal, they like, ooh, are you a Ghostbuster? Ooh. And I'm like, I roll my eyes and I want to slap them in the face. You know what I mean? So like, it is what it is. And that's why I'm working on other projects. There's a show I have called Abandoned History that I'm working on right now. That is a very serious show. And that's, obviously love history. And that's why I'm doing it, is so my portfolio is well-rounded. So when I'm, in the future, someone's looking at my portfolio, they're not thinking I'm a one-trick pony, which I'm not. And people will call me a paranormal investigator. And I'm like, well, I'm a filmmaker that covered that topic. Or people will walk up to me and be like, oh, you're the ghost guy. And I'm like, they don't mean it. They're not trying to be offensive, but like, I get it. So seeing that type of feedback from the audience and then from other people in the industry, it definitely, you got to have a chip on your shoulder. You got to, think about what your life will be like if you get to do what you want to do. And that ultimately is what drives me. You want to learn real world applications to what you want to do. And there's a lot, it's the same thing with web design too. And I don't want to get off course, but like, when you go to school, they're not necessarily teaching you the things that will apply to your job. And, there's things that you're not going to learn in school, but I think through going through the Michael Brown School of Hard Knocks, I've learned a lot. But yeah, you nailed it though. To kind of circle back with the age, I mean, I'm not getting any younger, and it stinks because I wish I was 28, with the knowledge I have now, because I still have all of that time in front of me. And what a time to be alive with DSLRs and the internet and fast internet, and you can upload things now before it would take you a whole day to upload something. So bottom line, you have to have experiences. You have to learn to fail before you can succeed. And that's
so I want
true.
to address that and the examples you gave before, because you mentioned Harrison Ford and some of the other people. And I sometimes wonder, because for me, I had it really easy all through high school. Like, I kept getting cast in leads, and I was cast in every show until my senior year. And then I lost out. And there comes a point when, like, if the rug gets pulled, you have a choice to make. You can either choose to be like, well, fuck you, I didn't want to do this anyway, or you can choose to be like, fuck you, I'll show you. And me, it was, no, this is what I'm doing. I'm going to find any way to do this. I'm not going to understudy. Screw that. I'm going to go be in something else, right? And I wonder if, with Michael Jordan and people like that, if they hadn't had that, I forget where this comes from. Maybe it's, I don't know, Taoism, Buddhism, Stoicism maybe, but like where the obstacle is the way, right? Like that obstacle creates you. You wouldn't be as strong if you didn't have that obstacle. That Michael Jordan maybe wouldn't have developed the work ethic he did if he hadn't been told no, right? Because Brandon was saying how he knows people, and I know people who are given everything, who are like, they have it easy, their families help and take care of them, they could do anything, and yet there are people, I'm not going to say me because it's not me, but like people like me who are like, yeah, I'm working 3 part-time jobs and I am making this happen. And so, and then to address your other thing, like that whole rug getting pulled can happen to literally anybody. Like I was at a voiceover conference this year, and Maurice LaMarche, who played the voice of everything really, but like he's known for the Brain from Pinky and the Brain, he talked about it, and they had a mindset panel. And he said when Frozen 2 came around, he was supposed to play the king again, like he did in Frozen 1. And then they recast him, and they pulled the rug on him, and they said, we're going to cast someone more famous. So it seems like it doesn't matter what level you get in this industry, unless you are M. Night Shyamalan and you can self-fund anything and don't need anybody else's input, which is the dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
But then there are other maybe problems with that. Like you want maybe a couple other cooks in the kitchen, but maybe not as many as most Hollywood movies have, right? Someone to tell you like, this isn't quite working. But yeah, all that to say, like, I wonder if I think sometimes those obstacles get us to where we need to be, as long as they don't defeat us. Yeah.
Sorry,
fuel.
Yeah, it's fuel. That's what it is. It's fuel. It's a journey, right? I mean, because even when you get to what you think is your destination, there's still more journey after that. I thought, okay, I'm going to get this TV show on Amazon and my shit's going to blow up and I'm going to be, successful. And no, I got a TV show in 70 countries. Like that's awesome. But, matter of fact, now when I talk about my portfolio, I don't mention Haunted State, and that's my most well-known. I don't mention it. I don't talk about it. I talk about my upcoming projects. Mainly, and I think so you get so lost in getting your ass kicked sometimes that sometimes you do forget who you are. And that's kind of where I've been the last year, because I'm a Scotty, but I do not live in Wisconsin anymore. I moved, and I'm on the West Coast, and it was really hard to leave all the people that I love, all the familiar places that I know. My wife really wanted the move, so that's why I did it. But then, we had a job opportunity out here, and I took it, and it fell apart. And the last year's been really rough. Like this is almost therapy to come in and talk about it. But yeah, I definitely think you appreciate the good times. I was just watching The Office, which I love The Office. And there's the episode where he said, I wish you knew when you were in the good days, so you could enjoy them more. And that is ultimately what a career in the arts is hey, when things are going good, I just appreciate it because you don't know where your next one's coming from. And I actually have a TV show called Conveyance, which is a cerebral take on the metaphysical, and it's kind of like Haunted State in a way, but it's more sciency. And it's I've been working with an actress named Moon Bloodgood, who was the lead in Terminator 4. She's been on a ton of TV shows on CBS, and she's awesome. And someone who's established in the industry, even we're having a hard time getting a pitch for the show. And she knows people. She calls them up and like, hey, you're like, yeah, sorry, So, it's just a matter of really talent and right time, right place, and just staying patient and trusting their process and growing in between those times when you're not being successful.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, like, what are you imparting to your students kind of, based on your experience?
The main thing is, so I think a lot of times, what a filmmaker is, it becomes relative to everybody. Like, to me, a filmmaker is you're exposing light to a sensor. How do you do that? The way you expose that light to the sensor conveys the feeling, the emotion, right? So I put a lot of focus on that part. DP to director of photography is teaching. You're thrown into a chaotic situation, especially in documentary film. Like, this thing is unfolding right now. You need to capture it right now. And you need to nail exposure. Good luck, have fun, right? You're outside, now you're inside, right? and it's that challenge. That's the thing I put a lot of focus on. And then the other focus I put is audio. It's clean audio. Noticing, like, if you're in a room and there's humming, trying to get that tone so you can clean that out later. And AI has really helped out. And I'm not a big AI guy, but in some instances it helps out. So I really put a lot of focus in audio, clean audio, and proper exposure, because that ultimately is that's 90% of your battle right there, right? Is those two things. And I always make sure that people who want to be a DP, I make sure they still learn the audio part of it, because you can fix bad video, but you can't fix bad audio. I mean, you kind of can now a little bit now with AI, like you got the wind coming and, you're outside, you got, if you guys ever have that where the wind is blowing over your microphone. And
as someone who has done podcasts, I can speak to this one. I will back you up 200% on that, because I have had to clean up audio that is just so bad it's almost unbelievable. And I have taken a cell phone video that was shot vertically in a very overexposed church, and just running through filters that were just like come with Adobe Premiere, made that into something like literally just click of a button. Hey, look at this thing. And now it actually looks like something. And then just with some minimal tracking, turned a vertical video into something horizontal that's actually watchable. Yeah. That said, you can tweak audio all day long, but if the audio is crap, I mean, it's just kind of the old thing of like polishing a turd.
Exactly. No, that's you nailed it. It's polishing a turd. So I put a little more emphasis on the audio part of it, and I have multiple sources of audio. But yeah, I realized what I learned in school, and then when I went into the industry, and I was like, okay, wait a minute. The things they taught me, I don't know any of this. I'm teaching myself basically. So those things I put into the curriculum. It's a high school course it's a TV and film high school course, and I think there's only like 6 or 7 of them in the state of Wisconsin. So it was really cool to put that together. I put it together with my wife, who actually ended up teaching the course. And it's the crazy thing about film now, though, is cameras and lenses and sensors have become so sophisticated that you can do some crazy, like you were just talking about, you can do some crazy stuff. If it's blown out, or if it's not usable, or if it's shaky, you can stabilize it now with After Effects. And but like you said, with audio, you're kind of SOL. So yeah.
So it sounds like you're giving your students a lot of practical things that you didn't feel like you got in school. Beyond that, because I went to school for theater performance, and the thing that they lacked was they taught all the performance stuff, but they didn't teach the business side of it. So you get out and you're like, well, now what? So is that something that you give your students? I mean, what do you tell them about sort of surviving this business?
You nailed it. And I'm really glad you said that, because that's something I'm struggling with right now as we speak. So I've decided that I'm going fully independent, and I'm going to have, third parties hire me to do stuff. And that's the part I don't like, is I don't want to run a business. I want to shoot film and edit film and make it cool and, make people happy. Right. So yeah, that part is so challenging. And that's kind of what I said earlier with the Karate Kid, is the more you know, the more capable you are, because, through my journey in radio, I became a webmaster. Now, I didn't want to be the webmaster of WKTI.com, but I learned Photoshop, I learned coding, I learned JavaScript, I learned PHP, I learned, all these Illustrator. Right? This is when I started to learn Premiere Pro, because they want to put video clips on the website. And this is where the more you learn, like, the better you are, bottom line. And it's totally like the Karate Kid is the perfect example, because you're doing all these things that aren't necessarily related to what you want to do. And then when you get put in a situation, you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. And as a filmmaker, there's two types of filmmakers though. There's your independent filmmaker who does everything, which is what I do. And you're burnt out and you never sleep and you get bags under your eyes like I have. And then there's the filmmaker who
really good lighting right now. So to just,
I have a really good lighting right now, filling this in. Yeah. But then there's the filmmaker who just, they do a lot of pre-production work. They put a lot of work into what they're going to do. And then they hire talented people to wear one hat and carry, you got your gaffer, your sound person, your DP, all your, and they're just doing the one thing. And I don't want to say just doing the one thing, because they're professionals at it. But ultimately, that's where you want to get as a filmmaker, because then you're able to have that perspective that you need to have when you're filming and editing. And, 85% of your work is done in pre-production. Before you even turn a camera on, you put it all on paper. But that's the tough part about being the independent filmmaker, is you're the one-man band doing everything. And after a while, you kind of start to think, is it really worth it? And you do go back and forth, and then you hit that point where you're like, well, hey, this is what I want to do. And you snap out of it. And that's how my whole year has been. It's been me trying to snap myself out of it. I started walking. I lost like 25 pounds. Part of it was because I wanted to lose weight, but part of it was like, I need to think. I need to figure out what I'm going to do, because I don't know how to run a business effectively. Like, I can create the product that you want, the video that you want, but it's like getting that client, like talking about the terms, like I'm not a fan of any of that. So yeah, do I teach my students that though? I make sure that if there's any sort of information for people who have experience on that, to take it, because I haven't. I have not. I don't have it. I ran a business prior to this, and I'm running a business now. But the running the business part is the part I don't like. Doing the work of the business is the part I love. So that's the part I do struggle with. And I know there's a lot of other creatives out there that feel the same way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I never wanted to be a business person ever. I considered business boring. I considered it like distasteful. And then you get into the real world and you're like, oh, I have to be my own small business. And so I kind of wonder if there's a way to, I'm sure there are programs out there. I know like Film North in Minnesota has their own classes on things like this. Like, here's how to get your film funded. Here's how to get, pitch. But I feel like almost there should be like, for each genre of art, there should be their own little school where it's like, if you really want to make a go of this, here's everything you need to know in one place. And also have it be, I say this because what you said before about how when you were in school, what you were learning was already outdated. Same for what I learned. When I was going to college, they were not teaching, hey, you're going to have social media and you're going to have to be an influencer and you're going to have to create your own content and all this. All of that came about right after I graduated. And so when I was in school, they were teaching us how to be part of repertory companies in regional theater. And it's like, that doesn't really exist anymore. You taught us something that was completely outdated and we can't keep up. So it's almost like you need to have a place where people can learn the business, but as it's happening right now, and have it be that fluid that it can keep evolving.
Yeah. And you made me think about something else while you were talking is, so before there were just filmmakers, well, now there's like content creators, and they've invaded my world, right? So like calling a filmmaker a content creator is basically like saying like fuck your mom. Like that's like the biggest insult to. So when people call me a content creator, especially if they know that, I'm like, come on. Because like think about it, your smartphone, you have a flashlight, you have a camera, you have a video camera. And for the teachers in math that said you wouldn't have a calculator with you when you were growing up, they're full of crap, because now I do. I wanted to point that out for all my teachers out there. But yeah, I mean, you can literally shoot like on an iPhone, the video is sick. I mean, you can do like there's codecs, like you can shoot in 10-bit, like what? Like it's crazy. So there's actually a scene in one of my films where we had this paranormal thing start to happen, and it was like out of nowhere. So I pulled my phone out and I recorded it, and I was able to use it in the film. It looks amazing. And I shot it on my iPhone. So there's a lot of people who want things for social media. And that's where I'm like, okay, well, I am looking for work now. Like, do I really want to do that? I don't know if I want to do that. Right. So there's more work for me, but it's also work. Like I kind of like for the web and like there's different types of shooting that you would do for the web versus than you would do for the screen, right? Small screen or big screen. So
sure. But I've seen some beautiful stuff. I've seen some really cinematic, gorgeous things created for content. So maybe it's just finding the right person or the right thing. Right.
Or I remember hearing something years ago where like Ridley Scott and his brother Tony, may rest in peace. Like they used to use their company to go, like they would make commercials in a way to kind of raise money. And that would also be like where I've heard that like a lot of directors will go do it on the slide. And that's kind of where they experiment and try new things so they can bring it back to like the filmmaking, part of their job.
Absolutely. And I mean, I've become a snob. Like I was actually going to use, my FX9 when I was on camera here, but I'm like, no, come on, just stop it. Like I have to like talk myself out of like the snobbiness that because you learn like, okay, this is what the standard is, right? And pulling yourself away from that. And that's the point I was trying to make with the content creators is you kind of become jumbled with the people who are content creators. And, it's some people just have the eye for it. Some people just have the natural talent to, because I mean, I see some of the videos out there, but I'm like, I think to myself, like, why would you waste a whole day filming this when you're just getting views? You're not getting anything out of it. But again, that's what I'm old. I'm Generation X. Like I'm sure that there's a lot of people like shaking their finger at me right now. But ultimately, though, it's a great time for film. It really is a great time. There's streaming services. There's cinema. I just don't think the cinema will ever die. I just think scale it back. I mean, if you look back, I heard Matt Damon. I think he was talking to Howard Stern, and he was talking about how when a film would come out before the streaming services, you would have your initial run at the theater. And then if you didn't do good, you'd usually make it up in DVD sales or rentals or whatever, right? Well, now the DVD sales and rental thing is out the window. It's gone. Now you better make all your money right out of the gate in the theater or you're screwed. And now you're realizing that you don't need to spend $180 million on a picture. You can, like kind of going back to the John Hughes films, those films where there's no special effects and they're really enjoyable. And I think there's a market for films like that now too. So, ultimately as a documentary filmmaker, I try to make sure that my budgets are low because like the Latimer film that I want to make, there's some reenactment scenes because it comes at a time when there were no photos, there were no videos, like we don't have anything to tell the audience. So we have to reenact them. And it's similar to a film that was done that actually did really well in Sundance. It's called Slavery by Another Name. The DP from that film where they reshot reenactment scenes is the DP and the co-director of my film, Vladimir. And the budget's only 1.3 million. And in the grand scheme of things, that's nothing. But we're still having a hell of a time getting funded. So bottom line is this is being a filmmaker, being a creative and trying to be successful. You're kind of just letting your hair on fire and hoping that it goes out, at some point. It's chaos, but like you have to embrace the chaos. And once you embrace the chaos, and I think of the scene of Bane from the Dark Knight, the last one, where he talks about the darkness. Like, I was born in the dark, and I am the dark. And ultimately, that's the mindset you have to really have, because most of the journey, you're going to be getting your ass kicked. You're going to be told how terrible you are, how you don't know what you're doing, how people. My favorite thing is when my friends try to pretend they watch something of mine because they think I'm going to be offended that they didn't see it. And like, I don't care if you watch it, that's fine. But people will like say things to try to get me to pretend that they watched it when it's like obvious, really obvious to me they haven't watched it.
They try to cue you up. Oh, remember when you did that thing like about this part of the movie, and like hoping that you'll throw them a bone so they can kind of be like, oh yeah, I love that. But like I just love it. It's kind of sitting where I'm at now. If it wasn't for my wife, I would be in big trouble. I'd be in really, really big trouble. She's the one like supporting our house really right now, like in many ways. So yeah, I think at the end of the day, if you want to be a creative, you really have to have thick skin. One, for the no's you're going to be getting, and two, for the negative feedback you're going to be getting, because it's going to happen no matter who you are. I'm curious, do you think like the next generation of filmmakers, like a lot of the kids that are coming up now, like they're going to have this like just a completely different, like, film has kind of gone through like evolutions in its time, like, where there's like the old school, you had like there's the, was it John, you had like the John Ford and the, like they had those big epic, like, the Westerns and the epics of like the 50s and the 60s. And then the 70s comes along, and then you get guys like Scorsese and Coppola and like George Lucas and Spielberg, who took those, like the cheesy serial movies that they saw when they were kids. But of course, now the technology's come along, and now you see these guys, now they're creating like blockbusters, like, Scorsese's making these big, like epic gangster movies and Coppola doing the same thing where it's almost like Shakespearean. And you get George Lucas taking these cheesy sci-fi movies and he revolutionizes the technology, and to where you get it to nowadays, where now you can do so much of this stuff. Like, as the technology's evolved, now you can get some kid that could go out and shoot something on their iPhone, jump on Adobe After Effects, and now put out something that would have been comparable to something that we would have had like in the late 70s, 80s, or even the 90s, depending on how good they are at it. That I think that this shift that we're seeing, and I'm curious because you're as a teacher, do you see that kind of like because now you get the whole content creator thing, which I could do a whole spiel on. I like how you put it, but do you feel that like there's like that next generation is going to be like coming out of this period where they're going to have like just a completely different view of filmmaking than like even, like people like us, like we're not old, but we're also old enough to where we can clearly remember, like that time before everything went digital.
Absolutely. No, that's a really good point. I mean, because if you even go back to the 30s with like Wizard of Oz, like you show up on set, they tell you who you're going to play. You didn't audition back then. You just were a talented actor. They hired you, and the model changed, as you were talking about, right? And that's what's happening. It's going to happen forever. Is the model's always going to change. And yeah, I think the more knowledge people have on the past, it's going to help them in the future. Because at the end of the day, it's still storytelling. There's still a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? That won't change. And I actually appreciate now, like when you looked at some of the special effects films from like the 90s, I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. And I don't want to rip on like the movie Speed, because back when I was a sophomore, that was my jam. I love that movie. But when I watch it now, the story's kind of crappy. It's kind of awful. And I like how they've taken special effects now and they've made them very cerebral. And I appreciate that, because you have a story that is like the first Transformers movie I thought was not the greatest, but the special effects were mind boggling. And it was either one or the other. And now you have a world now where you have both. And now you look at TV, go watch old TV. And now like starting with like Lost, from like Lost to like now, like The Sopranos, right? Like from that era to now, like TV. Actually, I enjoy TV more than I do film
Look
because
at like
they have
Game
more
of Thrones.
time.
That's like big budget cinema
Yeah.
now on your TV week to week.
Absolutely. And there's so many things like there's a show. So I was just traveling. I just came home. And like the day after I got home, I got really sick. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I was sick. Today's Thursday as we record this. So today's the first day I can talk. So I started watching. I'm like, okay, well, I can't do anything. I can't walk. I'm like, I felt like a 95-year-old man. And no offense to 95-year-olds out there. I'm just saying I felt old. And so I found this show, which I had never heard of. And I feel like a moron because it's amazing. Have you heard of this show called The OA?
Yes.
It's amazing. And shows like that, like you couldn't make that show 15 years ago. You couldn't do it. And now with technology and, because the budget would have been insane for a show like that. And now and it's just so cool. So yeah, I definitely think, to answer your question, I think there's a lot of tools that are at the fingertips of filmmakers, but my only hope is that they remember the story. The story at the end of the day is the most important part. It's not the special effects. It's not the color grading. It's not, maybe the music's important, but it's the story. Because that's what really separates it for me. No matter what I'm watching, if the story is not good, I'm checked out. I'm out. So yeah, I'm excited. And then you also have different aspect ratios, right? Because when I have people, I'm going to show you this. So when I show people filming like this, I get really mad and I want to slap the phone out of their hand because you film like this. But now I'm realizing, wait a minute, they're probably filming for social media. They're not filming for film. Right. So I would always get really mad, I'd say 5 years ago when I'd see people filming the wrong way, was it 9:16 versus 16:9? But yeah, it's a brave new world we're in for film. It really is.
Fucking TikTok, man.
Oh, you know what though? That's a whole nother topic. I'm on TikTok, but I've never created. What do they call it? It's like if you do if you're on Twitter and you call it a tweet. Do they have a name for it on TikTok?
I think it's just called a TikTok, man. And I've seen people do like good stuff. We have one of our guests. Actually, our very first guest is a guy named Mark Isaac. I've seen him actually do some pretty inventive stuff on there. Yeah. Even though, granted, he was a guy that came out of doing kind of they did all the jobs, and then kind of by the time he got to that, he already had so many tools in his belt that he was able to kind of pour them into that. But yeah, I'm fat. It's one thing. I just watched that movie Searching. Have you seen that?
I haven't seen it, but I'm familiar with it.
Searching?
It's John Cho, and I guess his daughter goes missing, but it's a lot of it is all done through computer screens and phones. It's kind of thing it's literally a movie that could not have been made.
Right.
Maybe not even. I don't remember. It's 15 years ago at least. I don't remember what year, but it's.
You know what we did? My wife and I did watch that actually in October. We watched that. Yeah.
And but I mean, again, I don't know what their budget was for that movie, but I mean, it's one of those, you were talking about, the story is the thing. Cause I'm thinking man, that's I haven't looked up what the budget is, but you're you could if anybody was smart enough to write that script, could probably go off and make this movie or make something in that style. But again, you have to be smart enough to write that and do it in a way that's compelling. Sorry, go.
It's like Host. Did you see Host?
I didn't see it.
It was made during the pandemic on just laptops and iPhones.
You told me about it, but I haven't seen it. I think
I saw the movie with Jake Gyllenhaal, where have you seen that one? Where they filmed it during the pandemic.
Yep.
And it's pretty much just starring him, and he's on the other line he's a 911 caller.
Oh,
I can't think of the name of, but I watched that and I was like, wow, how creative, because there were so many restrictions during that time, and they had nothing better to do, so they went and they made that. And I just think the creative storytelling is definitely the future. And growing up, in the 80s and the 90s, you had MTV and cable, and you didn't have the internet really even, and now you have all these mediums, and it's like I said, it's a brave new world, and I'm excited for it all. I mean, and I just want to clarify something. I wasn't ripping on content creators earlier. It's just
I hear you. I know. Yeah. I know. I think it's because it feels like it's just the most bare bones description of anything, because anything can be content, right?
Right.
So when you call, it's like saying, it's it's almost like where someone it's like they might not mean to insult you when you're like trying to be a filmmaker, but when they throw that label at you, it almost feels like they're just slapping you in the face.
Well, like I said, there's so many different types of content creators. There's like 12-year-olds who, are just putting their phone up and doing stuff. And then there's people who are creating like beautiful cinematic masterpieces with their recipes. I mean, so it's like you can take something that's simple and make it amazing. And also sometimes people are making things beautiful, but they don't have what, like you said, they don't have the story. Somehow it's lacking in any depth or soul, right? Sometimes there's things that are filmed really poorly, but the idea is there. And so you got to have both, right?
I totally agree with that. And like the show I talked about earlier, it's kind of like, I don't want to say it's replacing Haunted State, but it's basically like we live in this world now where there's a lot of people who have left religion, and and if you're religious, that's fine, whatever, each into your own. But we're at a time now where a lot of people have left religion and they still are looking for life's big answers, right? Mm-hmm. So we did some research on kind of what I talked about earlier on the science community, how they used to investigate. So Edison and Tesla did a lot of experiments on the paranormal, and then the Great Depression happened, and then paranormal and science just kind of changed. It just became this like goofy thing. And we've experienced now, I think it's the University of Arizona and the University of Virginia. They actually have real parapsychology departments, like Egon from a Ghostbusters, right? All these people are Egon, to put it in simple terms. Mm-hmm. So we were going to work with those people to talk about some of these like precognition and just all this crazy stuff. So that's the kind of show where it's like there's science, it's exciting. We do the experiment, and that's with Moon Bloodgood, who I had mentioned. So like shows like that too, like they wouldn't have been made 20 years ago, and not because of technology, because people would laugh at them and like, this is ridiculous. And now that society is really changing and people are more accepting, we had done some research that's like, have you ever experienced, or do you believe that you can speak to your loved one? Are they with you when you die? And 86% of people said yes. Where 20 years ago, it was below 50%. Mm-hmm. So it's like, it's not only our films changing, but like the way we think about life, the things that are important to us are changing too. And that's one of the things that I'm trying to focus on with my topics. Like I have another idea for a show, which I haven't done. And it's about technology, on how like doxing, if you're familiar with what that is, and like, all the crazy things that people can do through the internet and technology, and how we become brainwashed, and there's, radicalization, and like, so like that didn't even exist 20 years ago because it just wasn't there, because the internet wasn't there. So I think that goes hand in hand. Film goes hand in hand with society, and how we're evolving, we're changing.
So like now that we're kind of hitting about the hour mark, where can people find you online if they want to, check out your stuff or hit you up for whatever reason?
Sure. I like Instagram the best because it's the least polarizing, I think. And I'm at Michael, the Film Guy. I'm also on LinkedIn, but you just have to search Michael Brown. So good luck. My website is michaelbrownfilm.com. So all my stuff is on there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's nice to have a
really
tonight.
Good luck and Godspeed out there. So
I definitely need it. Thank you.
That will be all for this episode. To keep up with the show, follow us on social media at Scratch Claw Push. If social media isn't your thing, you can contact us at scratchclawpush@gmail.com. To learn more about the show, visit scratchclawpush.com. This podcast has been a Carcutta Media production. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for the use of brief quotations in a review. Copyright 2024 by Carcutta Media, LLC. All rights reserved.